Howdy, folks, and welcome to TuneScores, the only music review podcast on the SoundAppraiser channel. My name's Carrie Nightingale. With me, as always, is Kevin Niebrick. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm about 90%.
That sounds like a drastic improvement from the last time we talked. I'm really glad to hear it. I hope you're excited, because tonight we've got a real barn burner of an episode. This probably won't be terribly contentious, because I think we agree on the ratings of the songs, but we don't like them.
Not a fan.
Well, I should think not. We picked, for tonight's episode, our worst favorites. Kevin picked Werewolves of London by Warren Zevon and American Pie by Don McLean, and I selected Swish, Swish by Katy. Worst favorites might be a bit of a misnomer because they're in no ways either of our favorites. We just kind of don't like them. But we thought it would be an interesting exercise, not only for the purpose of tune scoring and whatever. We thought it would be an interesting exercise to put these songs out there. We know we don't like them, but let's see, as a music appreciation tactic, can we find things in them that are redemptive qualities? And I think we have. I think we each have found some things that make these songs a little more listenable in our eyes or in our ears. So why don't we just go ahead and start right off the bat with Werewolves of London by Warren Zevon. As one of Kevin's selections, I'll start off with a description of the composition. This rated a 1.6 out of 4.0 for me on the composition. I'm going to try this as a compliment sandwich. The groove is okay, but it's a very highly repetitive 5-4-1 chord loop. The song is almost completely devoid of melody because it's more spoken than anything else, and it has some of, let's be realistic, some of the sillier lyrics that I've ever willingly subjected myself to. Even if you try to assign some socially conscious subtext to the reading of the lyrics, like the Werewolves of London are actually the high-powered financiers and power brokers of one of the largest economic hubs in the world, it all comes crashing down as soon as Lon Chaney gets name-checked. Let's see, for another compliment to complete the sandwich on the composition, as far as hooks go, you could do a lot worse than howling. Well, that's how the composition struck me. Mostly down to the lyrics is why it had such a low score. But Kev, let's hear what your take is on it.
Yeah, I gave Warren a 2.2 out of 4 for this one. I agree with you that the lyrics for me are the thing that I like the least about it. The melody and the harmony are there. They're present, decent. The rhythm's not too bad. The melody itself, the one thing I have against it is that it has strong commonalities with Skinner's Sweet Home Alabama, which was recorded 4 years prior to that, and they did a lot more with it. Could have just been a similar melody that they both came up with independently. I'm not going to say that it was ripped off, but it's a little more simplistic, a little less interesting. The lyrics do a good job of telling a story, but rather than tell a cohesive story, it's really just kind of connecting different scenes haphazardly and putting them together, and they really have little to do with one another. As far as performance and production go, for performance, I really don't have anything negative to say about this song. Gave it a 1.0 out of 1.2. Warren Zevon, in an interview, I believe, mentioned that he was attempting to make a dance song, meaningless dance craze song, he said. I believe he succeeded in that attempt. Some nice guitar solos in there. The production, it's very simplistic. Everything is in its place, clear sections. The vocals were nice. The guitar solos were nice. I should have put that in performance, sorry. But the one thing I didn't like about it was that I kind of have to strain to hear the guitar solos. So I gave it a little fewer points in production. Ended up with a 0.8 out of 1.2. Do you have any notes on performance or production?
Very few notes on those areas for me. The performance, it sounded fine. Everything sounded accurate. I think the biggest sin is that they sound like they might be having fun, But that should really only count when I, as a listener, I'm also having fun. And with the lyrics, they're so silly. It's the problem I think I have with it is it's a novelty song that is instead fit into the classics bucket. I don't know if that's because of Warren Zevon's legacy as a songwriter, as an artist, or what exactly it is about this song that appeals so much to others. But as you'll hear in a moment, it does not appeal to me. For the production, I thought it was adequate, 0.8 out of 1.2. As far as the guitar solo goes that Kev mentioned, I thought it was a welcome addition. It's got a nice chorus effect on it. I think it didn't have quite enough time to really develop. I think it was off to a good start. Could have been longer. I mentioned this does not really appeal to me. And this is entirely subjective. And hopefully we've been able to show, at least hopefully I've been able to show in my critique of the song, that I appreciate certain elements of it. There are a couple of clever lines. It was really well performed, even if the riff is simple. I love the guitar solo. But this is not a song that really makes me feel anything. It's in that classic bucket for some reason, but I don't see a reason for myself to waste any more time on either listening to or discussing it. The appeal section rated a 0.4 out of 3.6 for me, giving it a final tune score of 3.5 out of 10. And I want to make sure that we're as clear as possible. We don't like these songs, but if you do like it, for whatever reason, whether you enjoy the chord progression or the melody or the lyrics or the way it makes you dance, that's awesome. And let us know in the comments if you wholeheartedly disagree with us. Everyone's entitled to an opinion on this channel, even Kevin. So speaking of, Kev, how did you rate it on the appeal?
So for me, it got a 0.6 for appeal overall. Emotion, not too much there. Innovation, very, very little. Repeat listenability, for me, is going to be really low, just because I'm not a fan of the entire thing for whatever reason. The thing is, we've listened to these songs so many times, and I'm starting to get this one, and it angers me. It's just a nonsense song. There's no reason for it, really. There never was one. Just a fun little tune to fool around with. Does have a good groove. I still hate it irrationally, and it continues to receive the lowest score I've given so far. My final tune score is a 4.6 for this one.
Well, there you have it. That's Werewolves of London. There are some high points to it, but it was written as sort of a throwaway song, and that's how Kevin and I are treating it. That said, it's time for a short break. This one's brought to you by Black Forest Caffeinated Grizzly Gummies. Truly the stuff of night bears. We'll be right back. Howdy, folks, and welcome back. For our next song, we've got Swish, Swish by Katy Perry. Since this was my selection as a worst favorite, Kev, go ahead and take on the composition.
Don't mind if I do. All right, I gave Katy a 2.1 out of 4 for composition. Again, I didn't have any problems, with the melody or the rhythm or the harmony. I'll say that everything was pretty adequate. I really disliked the lyrics. Some of the things that I didn't like, there were mispronunciations to fit the rhyme scheme, or the rhymes themselves were simple, or they were a near rhyme, or a self rhyme, rhyming the same word with itself. On their own, none of these things are, egregious sins for me, but you put enough of them together and then it just kind of falls apart as far as I'm concerned. What do you have to say about Katy for her composition there?
The exact same rating, 2.1 out of 4. Actually, I do have some notes, though. First off, let's talk melody. The pitch-shifted bass vocals do no favors for the overall melody, in my opinion. That may be more of a production element. But otherwise, the melody was quite compelling, everything that Katy was singing. The only thing really keeping the lyrics from rating about a 0 for me is the first 2/3 of Nicki Minaj's feature. I think overall there's a lot of potential in the composition from the beat and how the melody fits over it. I could absolutely see some enterprising musician writing completely new lyrics with a more chill message to match the instrumentation, and it could be great. I could see this current message as empowering because if you've got haters, the best way to empower them is to acknowledge them. So it's not necessarily the empowering message that Katy probably meant it to be. I thought the performance and the production were fine, rated at 2/3 credit, like most professionally produced and recorded songs are. This sounds like a pretty personal song to Katy Perry. I don't know who hurt her or what was going on in her career or what beef she had at the time of making this track, but there is some feel to her delivery, which is welcome. Those are all of my notes. Kev, what are your notes on performance, production, and appeal?
Don't disagree with anything you said, really. As far as performance and production go, Katy got 1.0 out of 1.2. It's a pretty high score. Everything was very nice. Again, professionally recorded. Both Nicki and Katy are professionals in their delivery. Everything was pretty decent. So no negative notes there. As far as appeal goes, a little bit less, 1.0 for an overall appeal score. The emotion I didn't get, didn't hit me. Innovation, I didn't feel like there was anything new there. Repeat listenability, again, just because I don't like the song, was low. I get the sense that this is a reaction to criticism, possibly undeserved or unwarranted. But I know very little about Katy Perry, and with no explanation in the song itself, I have no way to relate to this song. Believing in yourself and perseverance are good qualities. The message kind of delivers. But I'm just, when you get to the bottom of it, I'm not the demographic. This is clearly a song written specifically for Katy Perry fans or haters, and I'm neither. So her final score was a 5.1.
Okay. And I think I'm more or less right there on board with you. The appeal rated at 1.1 out of 3.6 for me. A lot of that, I think, has to do with the same thing, not really part of that audience. As a listener, as an outsider listening in, this song makes me feel a little bit, but it's not positive. Frankly, it's pity for Katy Perry and for what she was going through. Because the message of the lyrics gives this air of moral superiority, leaning heavily on that imagery of Katy as a tiger, which is maybe a callback to Roar, another one of her better but also inescapable songs, and of Karma as a character. She keeps receipts, Kevin, in case you hadn't heard. But there's really nothing about this track that truly is superior to my ears, and it's pretty unlikely that I would seek it out again or that I would really let it play by accident. It's going to mean something much different to the more diehard of Katy Perry's fans, and that's fine. Not every musician is going to appeal to every listener in the same way or to the same degree. So that's Katy Perry, rated at a 4.8 TuneScore out of 10 for me. So very close, I think, to yours, Kevin. But I think it's time for probably a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll see how far apart our scores were on American Pie, the epic from Don McLean. We'll be right back. Howdy, folks, and welcome back. For our final song in this episode, we're going to be trashing American Pie by Don McLean. And I shouldn't say trashing because, again, subjectively, this and the other songs that we've talked about tonight, they don't necessarily appeal to us. But I think we found some things that we do appreciate about each one and some things that we would change that would make it a song like American Pie appeal more to us. I'll start off, since this was Kevin's suggestion. I'll start out with a litigation of the composition. Now, this rated at a 2.4 out of 4 available points for the composition. Most of that was detracted from lyrics, where it only rated 0.4 out of 1 available point. I'll concede that although I despise this song, it is well crafted. The melody and the groove, they're excellent. It's the lyrics and the duration of the lyrics that detract most from the craft for me. Some lines are just kind of dumb, either in or out of context. If the Bible tells you so, moss grows fat on a rolling stone, it landed foul on the grass, the players tried for a forward pass, and no angel born in hell are some examples of lines that I particularly had issue with. The chorus is memorable, but frankly meaningless to me. And while I can give a pass on some religious references, there are too many here. I stand by the separation of church and song. But as the preacher said, I could write shorter sermons, but once I get started, I'm too lazy to stop. So, Kev, that's my take on the composition. Let's hear yours.
We're pretty close on this one. I got Don got a 2.6 out of me. The strongest part of this piece, I think, was the melody. I really like the melody. I don't hate it. I think the song itself is just really repetitive. So by the end of the 8 minutes, it's wearing out. The lyrics for me, not my favorite. They're poetic, but they're also encoded, and people are still debating to this date, the finer details of who he's talking about. What's exactly going on there, which is not bad, but something that after 8 minutes, again, kind of wears out. But the melody itself, again, to give it back, it's catchy. It works when it's being played slow, when it's being played fast, and this does a really good job of kind of taking it through all those elements, and it's really interesting. Performance was nice and strong. I really dig the piano in this piece. Don ended up with a 0.9 out of 1.2 for me for performance. Production, 0.7, a little bit lower out of 1.2. I really liked the note struck following the line, "The church bells all were broken." I thought that was pretty clever. The song, again, just too long. This could be a really powerful 5-minute song. What do you think?
I'm inclined to disagree. I think it would make a really powerful 2.5-minute song. And then the rest of it that got chopped out would make a really powerful 2-minute song and a really powerful 3-minute song, and so on and so forth. I think you have 5 songs in here. I didn't really scrutinize how I don't want to say chop up. It's a piece of art. We don't chop art. But how I would segment based on the lyrical message or content in one section versus another, and see how many different strong messages you could get out of it. For the performance, I thought it was really tight. I love the bass line when the bass is playing during the more rock-oriented sections. But it was a tight performance all around, and I actually really like Don McLean's voice. I'll talk about that in Appeal as well. For the production, same story. It's rated a little bit lower for me in the production because of that arrangement, because the mix is solid. It incorporates a lot of instruments, the vocals very well. And I would say, despite the song's success, and this is where we always get back to that point, the artists that we're critiquing, I'm sure they'd really love to hear our thoughts on a song and take our suggestions and things like that. We know that's not necessarily the position to be in, especially not when a song is nearly 50 years old and has had the kind of success that American Pie has. But I do still think, despite the song's success, a producer should have chopped it into about 3 to 5 different songs. As far as the appeal goes, again, the very specific lyrical references is actually one of the things that detracts from appeal more than makes it appeal to me, because it's almost 50 years old. It's rated at a 0.7 out of 3.6 for the appeal for me. I'm just having a hard time finding the emotional connection to make it listenable on repeat. This track might be a slice of Americana. It might be a heartfelt tribute to musical legends whose lives were tragically cut short. It might be a baby boomer's wet dream of nostalgic references. a reminder of when life was simpler and better, despite the darker messages that were sent out by so many of the artists that got name checked in the song, like the Byrds, the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones. It might be all of those things and more. It just doesn't strike me personally. And while I love Don's voice and the melody, and especially that bass line that bounces under much of the song, the story it tells me might as well be fantasy. There's a reason it's called the American Dream and not the American Reality. Listening to this for the purpose of tune scoring kind of felt like work in a way that listening to music seldom does for me. I rated it a final tune score of 4.5 out of 10. It does have its moments, but those moments come too few and too far in between for a track that lasts 8 minutes for me. Kev, this was your suggestion. You're in defense on the appeal section.
I think this is an important song, right, for what it's attempting to do. I think that it just maybe hasn't aged well. Like, it's very specifically about a time period that we're rapidly getting further and further away from. I think if somebody did a similar thing today and wrote a song like this, they could start with January 2020, and they'll have a 38-minute song by the time they're done. Now, looking back on this song itself, at the time it was written, the enigmatic lyrics would have played really well because the events and the characters were ripped directly from the current headlines. So at the time, it makes sense. But unless you've done a deep dive on the lyrics like we have, and I'm sure a lot of people have, this is just jumbled nonsense to us because this was so far removed from the past, and you're talking about people cryptically, not specifically saying who they were and stuff. I would have been happy and I would have felt cool to know the meaning behind the lyrics if I were older, if I were a different age group, different cohort. And I feel like this song could be 4 choruses shorter, really. It's just too long. It's 8 minutes. My rating for the appeal, Don got a 1.2, and his overall tune score was a 5.4.
Now, if you've stayed with us through the end, and I hope you have, we want to make sure that we're not just talking the talk, but we're also walking the walk, so to speak. When we say that it's important to be able to take criticism just as well as you give it, and that we do this understanding that there's a lot of subjectivity, and that hopefully we've justified why we feel a certain way about a certain song. And hopefully we've been able to impart to our listeners that even if you don't necessarily like a song, that there still may be elements of it that you do like, that can inspire you even. And to that end, we want you to stay tuned to our next episode, in which we're going to take one of Kevin's songs and we're each going to critique and give it a tune score. And then we're going to take one of my songs and do the same thing for it. And hopefully we'll be able to show that we can be as self-critical as we are of anything else, but hopefully we'll be able to find some highlights of our own tracks as well. So turn on those YouTube subscription notifications and whatever else. You'll want to be here for that next episode. On that note, it's probably a good time to end. That's been Kevin Niebrick. I've been Carrie Nightingale. We want to thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, even on these songs that we came in knowing we didn't necessarily like, but we wanted to give them a chance, we want you to give them a chance as well. So we've updated the TuneScored tracks playlist with these songs as well. Go check them out. Let us know in the comments how you felt about those songs and about our critique. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.